But let's stay within the region. Nigeria and Benin Republic is looking to start negotiations towards a formal memorandum of understanding on enhanced economic cooperation in the second half of 2025. Nigeria's Minister of Trade, Industry and Investment, Dr. Jumoke Oduwole, was in Benin Republic late last week to ramp up on trade and economic relations with Nigeria's closest neighbor to the west in the region. The minister's trip to Benin Republic comes even as the U.S. President Donald Trump announces 15% as the new threshold of tariffs on a number of countries, including Nigeria, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and others here in West Africa and around the world. Joining me live from Abuja studios to discuss this and more is the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade, Industry and Investment, Dr. Jumoke Oduwole. We thank you, Madam Minister, for making time for this conversation tonight here on our Arise News channel.
Pleasure, Bosun. Good to be here.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Let's start with the Benin Republic. What are the imperatives of a stronger trade relations between Nigeria and Benin Republic? Why is it important?
Well, Benin Republic is our closest neighbor. A lot of trade goes on, both informally and formally, across our borders, our various borders. And the relationship has been a long and checkered one. We've had issues in the past. We've also had very strong collaborations in the past. The two presidents, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was in Benin Republic in December of 2023, kicking off a new start to a trading relationship. We also had President Talon attend the inaugural West Africa Economic Summit. Now, at that summit, we signed an MOU in the presence of the two ministers, my counterpart and I, in the presence of the two presidents, committing to jumpstarting a more collaborative and deeper trade relationship that can deliver tangible, pragmatic impact for our business communities and for our economies.
So this is you, Honorable Minister of Trade, Industry and Investment, ramping up what Mr. President did about 2 years ago. So let me ask you give me some of the highlights of your discussions last week in the Benin Republic. What milestones were you able to reach, fleshing up on President Tinubu's earlier trip to that country?
So the earlier trip spoke about just how we can get our borders to be more seamless. You would know that Seme border is one of the most critical borders that Nigeria has, and it's not the only one. We share borders right across the length of our two countries, to our west and to their east. Now, the idea the two presidents had was to just basically make our borders completely seamless. Now, we were there. We have a delegation supported by the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs and the Comptroller General Customs. The Permanent Secretary of the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment was also a member of that delegation. The senior officials from all those ministries met on the 31st with their counterparts, and then the honorable ministers, after celebrating the 65th Independence Day at the invitation of President Talon, had a ministerial engagement on Saturday. Now, there are 4 thematic areas to this memorandum of understanding that we're about to go into negotiations in Q4 of this year, starting with trade in goods, trade in services, and private sector engagement, and then our customs and trade facilitation, and of course, the legal framework that would guide our interactions. So those are the 4 buckets, and we intend to crystallize and formalize all this before the end of Q1 of 2026. The idea is to make sure that we also toured the seaport in Benin Republic. It's a seaport that some Nigerian businesses do use. It can service maybe, let's say, about 5, certainly not more than 8% of Nigeria's market, but it also helps take pressure off, and it services the region. So we toured the port and looked at some of the challenges that have been in the sense that Nigeria has said, Benin Republic, we have to have our duties. We have to have our duties complete. Nigerian goods that are coming into the Nigerian market must come in, haven't paid the appropriate duty. And so Benin Republic, very collaborative, very open to creative and innovative ways of making sure that that happens. The engagement or the collaboration between our two customs is actually a model that is going to be used across the other 3 thematic areas of the MOU.
Interesting that all this is done. Negotiations going to concretize those discussions at the signing of a formal agreement with Benin Republic, if that's going to happen. Now you talk about paying appropriate duties. I'm sure that's talking tariffs, by the way. So whatever it is, we'll also have to deal with that. So Benin Republic so critical to Nigeria, as it were, touring the port, and I love that, and the customs and other top government officials with you that are relevant to work that you are trying to achieve on the ground. Well, what sentiments did you get, Madam Honorable Minister, about the 2 countries doing more formalized trade during your trip last week, not just informal, on the ground, across the border, but formalized trade, because the size is so huge?
It's extremely collaborative. We met with key ministers, the senior minister for finance and the economy, the minister responsible for trade, the minister responsible for foreign affairs, the minister responsible for justice and the keeper of their seals. We also met with the head of their customs agency. We met with the ports authorities. We inspected the border, both sides. We addressed the officials working at the border. It's a joint border station. What this signals is the political will from our 2 presidents to make sure that our borders work right across from south to north, that our borders work for Nigerian people and for Beninois citizens, to make sure that goods can move and can be traced. Let's call the elephant in the room to make sure that there's no smuggling, there's no incentive for smuggling, because the 2 governments, G2G, have put in place systems and tracking systems right from the ports, the tracking of goods, all the way into the Nigerian territory. The Nigerian economy is an important one for Benin, and that port is also an important one for Nigeria, because Nigeria is scaling up in exports promotion. We're scaling up. We are a trading nation. And so when you look at our demographics and where we have our ports, it's just an addition in terms of infrastructure to service the Nigerian market. So it's also in our interest to make sure that that efficiency at the ports, as we build up our own ports, it's also an additional advantage that we can use that port. Nigerian traders are pushing. Non-oil exports was up by 24% to the rest of Africa, as released by CBN at the end of Q1. And so when we look at the African Continental Free Trade Area, Bosun, you know that our policy, we look in concentric circles. So our bilateral trade with Republic of Benin is one thing, then immediately look at our trade across the West African region with the inaugural West African Economic Summit. We're also champions in the African Continental Free Trade Area, and you know our positioning with the WTO and at the multilateral trading system. So that's how we look at things from this administration, and we put in place the trade policy that can actualize the impact for the Nigerian economy.
A very interesting and quite a successful trip there to Benin Republic. But while you were there, President Trump, the US president, launched a fresh wave of 15% tariff on a number of countries, including Nigeria and West Africa, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and others. What's your immediate reaction to that development?
Well, you know, Bosun, that on this matter, we have said a number of times we're not reactionary. Our response is to continue with what this administration, with the renewed Hope 8-point agenda, has focused on. I just talked about our strategic trading partners. The US will remain one. We have our commercial investment partnership, which we launched on the 24th of June. In fact, the ambassador was in my office today with his team, just looking at the progress on that. Our private sector, businesses that have investments from the US, and also businesses in Nigeria that do business with the US, we continue to support them as they undertake their B2B endeavors. And we continue to focus on what is good for Nigeria first. Domestic investors, our tariff structure, our AFCFTA, our bilateral engagements with old strategic partners like the US, like the UK, and also newer strategic partners like the UAE, like China, like Brazil, like Japan. So the world is a big place. There's a lot of trade going on everywhere. We know where we focus on in terms of trade with the United States. It's a very energy-driven trade relationship. We also have some important energy trade relationship. We also have some important non-energy trading in the area of fertilizer, urea, lead. We have some cocoa. We have some other non-oil exports. We're also encouraging our businesses to explore other markets and working on market access, working on access to markets, access to capital. You would recall that we had our first domestic investors summit about 2 weeks ago, and this is the focus of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The U.S. had mentioned in their rationale for this 15%, or earlier the 14%, some of the trade facilitation issues, which some of them we take as fair comment, and you would know that we're already addressing many of these systemically for our own good, first of all, for Nigeria first, in terms of our national single window project, in terms of even the strongest critics would admit that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been able to stabilize our monetary policy, our FX repatriation, and so these are the things that we continue to work on. We also know that the U.S., it's a symbiotic relationship. A lot of the manufacturing equipment that our industrialists use, some of them are from the United States and they're coming at zero tariffs. When you add services to the balance and trade between the two countries, you see that with our digital trade sector, the balance of trade is significantly in the U.S. favor. So we know that the U.S. appreciates that Nigeria has a lot to offer. We haven't put in any offer because we're just like listening and watching the posturing of the U.S. and all our trading partners. We've said this since January. So this administration is a responsive one. We're focusing on what we have determined is the best for Nigeria, and that is the line that we're going to continue to toe.
Okay, I was about to ask Honorable Minister if at some point Nigeria would want to perhaps sit down with U.S. government officials and say, can we negotiate this 15% down? Can we go to 12%, 10% at some point? Is that a threshold that we'd like to reach at some point in the near future, as it were?
You know, the thing is that as we look at things right now, it's the U.S. government's prerogative to put tariffs where they feel is good for their economy. I saw the CNN carrying the other day that these tariff changes are good for the U.S. economy, and that's fine. We also have to focus on what is good for the Nigerian economy and what will support our investors, domestic investors in particular, who are the best advertisement for foreign investments to thrive in this climate. So we put our attention in focusing on our bilateral trade relationships. We put our attention on focusing on how to galvanize capital and investment across the region. You know that we're leading champions in the AFCFTA, particularly in the area of digital trade. So we're not going to focus on reacting or trying to get reciprocity. We're going to focus on supporting. So for instance, our businesses in the area of fertilizer and urea, that's an industry that is growing and is going to continue to grow for the next decade to more than. This is a product that is wanted across the world. We have markets for it in Brazil. We have a strong market in the US. And so we're going to continue to focus on those businesses and see how to support them to thrive.
So I love what you say, because that's part of our economic policies and strategies that need to change. So if I can read your mind, Nigeria is currently not just solidifying and saying, having a warm handshake with our traditional business partners, we're also looking for other markets and other business partners around the world in the face of these global tariff headwinds.
That is correct, and that is what every smart administration should be doing. And President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a very smart business person, even before being a politician. And so when he looks at the terrain and looks at the global headwinds and where all economies are today, when you look at the renewed hope agenda, the 8-point agenda, you will see that this economy is moving in the right direction. Even the strongest critics will admit that whatever the lag, we're in the right direction and the best is yet to come.
Oh, great. So, Madam Minister, let's have a bit of your outlook on Nigeria's trade and investment in the second half of 2025. And I want you to drill a little bit more into this domestic investment forum, as it were, in terms of catalyzing local capital, whether they're in pension funds, whether they're in deep pockets, under the pillows, under the mattress, wherever it can be found, to ensure that we can deleverage access to finance for small and medium enterprises. Again, you look at the stock market, you've seen companies reporting some very good numbers in the first half of the year, from the agriculture sector to trade to breweries and others. So, do you think, when we do have that momentum, give me a bit of an outlook on what should be expected in the second half of the year, as we begin to say, look, we've dealt with the key pain points, as it were, of the first subsidy removal, exchange rate realignment. We're now beginning to see something of a blue ocean, quote and unquote.
That's a very good question. When we started 2025, we said that this was an inflection point. It was an important year for this administration and for the country. You would recall that we hosted the Africa Venture Capital Association at the end of Q1 of this year. We brought Africa and the world venture capital, private equity to Lagos, Nigeria. It was a week-long solid outing to showcase what it is, the reforms, and where we are with the Nigerian economy. About a couple of months later, we hosted the African Sovereign Wealth Authorities here in Abuja, hosted by NSIA. And that conversation also looked to galvanizing patient capital. We've continued to focus. You may recall that I was at the stock exchange, the Lagos Stock Exchange, Nigeria Stock Exchange in Lagos, ringing the bell and engaging on capital markets and what it means. We need both a mix of portfolio investors, foreign investors, longer-term patient capital. Just last week, I was with Standard Chartered Bank having their Africa Summit again in Lagos. In Addis Ababa in February, you had the financial institutions, the development financial institutions, Appraising, AFC, AFDB, Africa Re, talking about the Africa Club, and that is catalyzing African capital. And if I just stay with Appraising a little bit, you know that they had their annual general meeting here in Abuja. I list all this to show that it is an Afrocentric, first of all, making sure that we know, and private sector knows, that no one can do this for Africa. And Nigeria is in the forefront of that charge of how do we keep and retain our investments, our capital on the continent. And what does that mean, bringing it home for Nigeria? It means that, for instance, discussing at the Domestic Investors Summit, we discussed two critical things. The first one was access to capital, and the second one was access to markets. Now, you asked me about access to capital. We know what it is, the cost of capital, and how does that come down? It's bringing that confidence, that trust. After you've fixed the elements, the macroeconomic terrain, you now have to bring the trust to make sure that that capital can come here to partner with local capital and ensure that the cost of capital can come down. It doesn't come in one fell swoop. As you know, it takes a lot of work. And you see that this administration, whether on the monetary side, the fiscal side, you see the whole reform of our tax infrastructure, you see all the work that the central bank has been doing, and you see what our own private sector, just even our banks, and how they're now consolidating, and they're going to be bigger and stronger. What this translates into is trickling, first of all, to the larger businesses, having that access to capital at a cheaper, more affordable rate, and then their ecosystems being able to bring the price down gradually for small and medium-sized enterprises. So the trajectory is clear for the second half of this year. I expect that by the time we're in Q1 of 2026, looking to that year, we would have seen a significant shift in terms of how capital is being catalyzed on this continent, and particularly in the Nigerian economy.
Thank you, Madam Honorable Minister. I'm sure you'll be in Algiers for the Intra-Africa Trade Fair in about 4 weeks from now. And I would like to see what Nigerian economy what will be the key message and what will be showcasing there, from entertainment to music to trade and the rest. And look forward to speaking with you. We'll touch base on all before then, as always. Thank you so much for that, Madam Honorable Minister, Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Jumoke Oduwole. We appreciate those insights.